This CNBC article claims that the wealth of the top 1% in the US has reached $44 trillion. In the last decade, the wealth of the top 1% has more than doubled. From 1996 onwards, the gap between the rich and the poor has widened each year. To make matters worse, the housing prices has increased by 210%, while the average household income has only increased by 78%. But there is hope, because we have something called the education system, which serves the purpose of leveling out differences and reducing inequality by giving people an opportunity to get a good education, which depends upon academic performance in terms of grades. But when we look at the statistics, it doesn't seem like the education system is doing its job. Empirical data shows that children whose families belong in the top 20% of income earners were 7 times as likely to succeed in academia compared to children from the bottom 20%. The real question is, why? And if society is this unfair, then why isn't there a revolution going on in our streets right now? The last decades in social science have crowned a new king, the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. His influence has been unparalleled, and his theory is centered around conflict. There are lots of people in society, and they all belong to different groups. The problem is mainly something peculiar called capital. Capital is a resource, and it is finite, which means that there is not enough capital for everyone. As a consequence, the different groups in society have to fight over it. There are mainly 3 types of capital, and a 4th one that is exclusive to certain types of people. Economic capital is all types of financial resources which can be used to invest and profit, such as money or property. Cultural capital is about how well you know the culture around you, including the language and the norms. And things such as academic degrees are cultural capital. Your manners, your music taste, the artwork you own, all of this reveals your amount of cultural capital. You know the scene in Titanic where Jack is about to meet Rose's family for a dinner, and he is trying to observe how the rich move in order to imitate their style. That is because he's trying to hide the fact that he doesn't have as much cultural capital as the elites around him. Like economic capital, cultural capital is largely inherited from one generation to another, giving children from the dominant class a big advantage in education, for instance. More on that in a moment. Thirdly, social capital is the groups you belong to and the people you know. Going to elite universities and connecting with people from the dominant class gives a significant advantage, which may give you access to certain positions, jobs, exclusive organizations, and business opportunities. Bourdieu emphasizes that each form of capital are field-specific. They are mainly valid in their own field because society is divided in different social fields. Cultural capital can be accumulated and used in the educational field, for instance. Economic capital in the economic field, such as the stock market. In theory, you cannot directly buy an educational degree, because that would mean that you are using economic capital in the field of education, where it is not valid. But Bourdieu also highlights that one form of capital can be converted from one field to another. If you have a lot of cultural capital, you can communicate better with people and connect with them, thus gaining you social capital. Or your cultural capital can give you a prestigious education and thus gain you a lot of economic capital. You get the point. Lastly, there is symbolic capital, which is the most exclusive form of capital. Symbolic capital is things such as honor, prestige, or charisma. Doctors, politicians, actors, these people have symbolic capital. When a doctor or an actor speaks out on a political issue, for instance, people will take him more seriously compared to a janitor or a waitress. Symbolic capital is thus a bonus. It comes with a prestigious position and cannot be gathered the same way as the other forms of capital. The amount of and the types of capital you have decides your position in the social space, which is society as a whole. The social space is thus the grand societal hierarchy. If you are placed here, it will mean that you have a lot of capital from each type of capital, and your children are likely to end up here when they grow into adulthood. The same is said for people born in the bottom positions. The reason for this is the term habitus, which is probably one of the most important ideas in sociology. Habitus is embodied history. Your familial background is not just your current parents, but also their parents and their parents before them. Habitus is an internalization of your family's historical culture. Social circumstances converted to your biological nature. Habitus decides your tastes, behavior, and thought patterns. It is your lasting dispositions. It is outside the reach of our consciousness, and thus it controls us, not the other way around. So when research shows that rich kids do better in school compared to kids from poorer families, it's because the language of the education system, the academic language, is closer to how the rich formulate themselves. Academia prefers the habitus of the upper class. According to Bourdieu, all these things are arbitrary. The upper class are constantly in a position to set the rules of society. They decide what is deemed as nice music, beautiful art, good literature, classy behavior, and so on. The resources in the world, capital, is unjustly and unevenly distributed, and this uneven distribution is arbitrary on top of that. But if most people are oppressed, and it isn't supposed to be like that, then why isn't there an uproar in our streets? Why aren't people once and for all pulling a modern French Revolution in all the countries of the world where inequality exists? Why are we all just sitting around and not destroying the current social order? Bourdieu says it is because of naturalization. The rich have symbolic power through their exclusively gained symbolic capital. They use this power to convince everyone that the uneven distribution of capital is because the dominant class are simply better at the game of life. The rich are smarter, more hardworking, make better investments. They choose the right occupations. The dominant class is reclassifying our understanding of inequality and forming the collective perception of reality with the goal of normalizing inequality. The poor aren't supposed to be poor? Wrong. It has always been this way. It is natural. They aren't working hard enough as me. This is the core of the term naturalization. They convince everyone that inequality is simply a natural phenomenon. But I don't know. What do you think? I answer pretty much every comment, so feel free to tell me your thoughts.